Today's webinar is entitled The Harmonica and the Blues. Our presenter today is Tom Haney, Senior Lecturer for the Center for Multidisciplinary Studies. Tom has been a full-time faculty member in the Center for Multidisciplinary Studies at RIT since 2007. He was promoted to Senior Lecturer in 2014. He has taught a variety of courses, but focuses on communications courses. He recently developed and is now teaching a course called The Harmonica and the Blues. Among his degrees is a certificate from the Center for Multidisciplinary Studies in Professional Communication. Tom has worked in the private and public sectors and as a freelance writer and consultant. Tom has played harmonica in blues, rhythm and blues, swing, and rock bands since the 1970s. He opened for such blues legends as John Lee Hooker, Buddy Guy and Junior Wells, John Mayall, and Robert Cray. While teaching at RIT's global campus, American University in Kosovo, Tom played regularly with a local Kosovo band. Tom has taught harmonica classes for adults and children, and his harmonica playing has been featured on local television. In 2001, Tom and a fellow musician formed a corporate team building program called Blues Power. This fun workshop uses the Blues Power principle of looking out for one another, making the best with what you have, and rising above the things that get in the way to get people, most with no musical experience, to come together and play the blues. Tom, let's get started.
Thank you, Talia. And thanks everybody for joining me today to give me a chance to talk about something that I love and I now get to teach here at RIT, which is fantastic. It's something that can be played by people of all ages, and it's an important part of music that's influenced so many other kinds of music and people enjoy around the world, and that is the harmonica and the blues, which happens to be the name of my new class. It sounds a little bit like this in case you're not familiar with it. All right, that's a little bit of the blues. But I thought I'd start by giving you a quick overview of how I got interested in the blues and the harmonica. It actually started when I was back in college and listening to the music of the day, which was the music from the 60s and 70s, a lot of rock bands, the British Invasion bands, Motown, but people like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Stevie Wonder, a great harmonica player, Eric Clapton, all the different bands that he played in, the Doors, Jimi Hendrix, all these people. There's so many more. As we were putting this together, I thought of more names I wanted to add to this list, the Supremes and the Four Tops, bands like that, Aretha Franklin. This band is the J. Geils Band, which was a fantastic band. Came out a little bit later, were highly influenced by the blues. Now, one of the things that caught my attention, being at that time a college student in the 1970s, in the early 1970s, was how these bands gave credit to musicians and bands that I didn't know anything about. People like Muddy Waters and Robert Johnson, Little Walter Jacobs. There were more than that. There was Sonny Boy Williamson and Bo Diddley. And I got curious about these people, as college kids are wont to do. And we got interested in looking up more about these people, and it was great in the old days with the album covers. You could often read about them, and we'd go to the record stores around town. Maybe you remember the House Guitars, and we'd just go through all the bins and pull out the blues records. A lot of the record stores had bins that were just for the blues. They were usually a small one tucked back in the corner. We'd go through them. They were often cheaper than the other records, which I always appreciated. And I'd look and see who was on it, if these were the people that had influenced the rock and roll stars. And we'd take them and listen to them. Even probably more influential than that was a place that some of you may be familiar with as RIT alumni. It was the Red Creek Inn, which is almost across the street from RIT, kitty corner to RIT on Jefferson Road. It's now McGregor's if you're a more recent graduate. And the Red Creek opened back, I think, in the 60s, a little bit before my time, but it was a little tiny place. And it was probably, I'm going to say, 1/5 the size that it is now. And it looked like a little juke joint. I didn't know what that was at the time, but it was just this cozy little place. Now, these great blues acts toured around the country, where in previous generations, decades, most of their touring happened in the South. But in the 60s, as they were discovered, or they've been around for a long time, but as more people became aware of them, they started touring across the whole country, often in little places like the Red Creek. So we started going to the Red Creek. In those days, you could be 18 years old and get into any nightclub. We started going to the Red Creek, a few other places too, but the Red Creek was one of the main stop on this northern circuit. And I made a little list the other day of people that I remember seeing from back in that time. I saw people like Muddy Waters, Walter Horton, Sonny Terry, Luther Johnson, Buddy Guy, Johnny Copeland, Sun Seals, Johnny Shines, Eddie Shaw, John Lee Hookers. These were some of the biggest names, some of the greatest blues players ever. These are the people who influenced the rock and rollers. And sometimes I'd see the name on a rock album, and then I'd be sitting next to them at the Red Creek. We'd talk to them on their breaks. We'd be the little college kids. I'm sure they ran into at every stop. But we'd ask them questions, and they were overwhelmingly very polite, very cordial with us. Now, in the rock and roll that I loved that had been influenced by the blues sometimes had harmonica on it, the rock and roll bands. And God bless them for trying. They'd play a little bit of harmonica on it. But I was never really enamored with that, with the rock players. And so I wasn't particularly taken by the harmonica. It was, to be honest, it wasn't very well played by the rock bands. And I'm grateful that they played, but when I got to see these blues players, these guys who came often from Chicago, sometimes from other places, Detroit, and from down south, and got to see the guys who had been playing for 30, 40, even longer, 50 years they had been playing this style of harmonica, I was enamored. I was struck. There was also another great influence there, and that's the band that we just showed. Maybe you could go back there and show them again. This is the J. Giles Band. They were from Massachusetts, a little bit later than the 60s. I think their first album came out in maybe 69 or something like that. But they had an album that was called Full House. It was a live album that was just a fantastic bridge between rock and roll and the blues. And they had a great harmonica player in the band. And he had one song that I'll bet you sold 1 million harmonicas after this song came out for people who were interested in this kind of thing. And it was called Whammer Jammer, and it sounds a little bit like this. Okay. Thank you. And that was backed by the full Jay Giles band, those other guys that you see on the screen. And it's smoked, and I notice I'm getting a little away from the original in my playing of it now, which I think you get the idea of what it was. And between seeing the blues acts at the Red Creek and the Jay Giles band and the influence of rock and roll, I headed down to the House of Guitars in Irondequoit. Maybe you remember that if you're out of town. I hope everybody should go to the House of Guitars at least once in their life. And bought my first Marine band harmonica, which is still a standard harmonica. It's used by many great players. And I bought what I believe at the time was about the only book on how to play the blues harmonica. It was written by a guy named Tony Little Son Glover, who's still playing today, I believe, in the Minnesota area, I believe. So that's when I got started, and I've been playing ever since. So let's talk now about what is the harmonica and where did it come from. The first thing we have to understand about the harmonica is that it's a free reed instrument. Free reed means that there's reeds inside the instrument. The reed is a thin strip, in this case of metal, an alloy, and it moves freely. It's attached at one end, and we push air across the reed, and we make it move. It doesn't touch the instrument at all. When it pushes the air, it creates a sound wave that creates a pitch that we hear. The pitch is in relation to the size of the reed and how much weight there is to the reed. As you can see in front of you, we took apart a harmonica, and this is the standard 10-hole, what we call diatonic harmonica. You can see it's an old one. I don't know how old this one was that we took apart, but you see 10 reeds on the top there and 10 reeds on the bottom. Those little thin strips of metal that are made primarily out of brass, well, when we blow into the harmonica, will move. And we often try to blow just one, catch just one reed, and it'll quiver, it'll go up and down and send out that sound wave. Now, there are other kinds of reed instruments, such as the saxophone and the clarinet. You see the saxophone on the left, and on the right side is a clarinet mouthpiece. They're called fixed reed instruments, meaning the reed is attached to the instrument, and when you blow across the reed, it moves, and it actually touches the instrument, the body of the instrument, and the pitch is made by its contact with the instrument. So that's the difference between a fixed reed and a free reed instrument. So let's look at where the harmonica came from, or at least the free reed. Let's go back. We can go back about maybe as far as 4,500 years BC for the first indication of a free reed instrument. We can go back to China, and Emperor Huang Tri, who supposedly developed the first free reed instrument. At least some people believe so. I find it a little hard to believe that the emperor was out there making instruments, but he was the most powerful emperor in the world at that time, so I wouldn't tell him any differently myself. We also have from China evidence, real evidence, from about 3,000 years ago in the Han Dynasty of pictures on the wall in the burial grounds of what appears to be a shang. So the shang is an instrument. We have a picture of one here. I'm going to forward that. Okay. But I'll describe it to you while we're finding it. The shang is an instrument that has pipes. They actually are vertical pipes. And you blow into a mouthpiece. We have a picture of a modern shang. And that shang, you'd blow into the mouthpiece, and using your fingers, you would cover holes that will determine what pitch it will get, where the air will go, and how long each of the pipes is. So, all right. So are we without the sound? Or? Okay. Let me tell you, let's talk a little bit about how it ended up in Europe, which is really where the harmonica, as we know it, developed. There's, it was actually in Laos. I'm stepping backwards a little bit here. And Laos may be the place where the shang was actually developed, the free reed instruments. They had many instruments coming out of Laos. And it may have spread to China and Korea and Japan, into the Pacific Islands, to Persia, and what we now know of as Turkey, and that then spread up into Europe. A couple of examples of how it ended up in Europe is a Jesuit priest who was in China, who did extensive research on the instruments in China, and his name was, the Jesuit priest was Amiot, and he brought instruments back to France. There was also an Irishman, one of my people, John Wilde, who learned to play in Russia, learned to play the shang and brought it back to the British Isles and to Ireland. Well, let's talk about the instrument that we know, the harmonica. The harmonica it's a little cloudy when it actually started. It gets to be a little confusing because there's a big gap between when these instruments were brought from China to Europe and when we start to find evidence of the harmonica as we know it. The things that were written at that time, instruments were often called the harmonica. There's a number of them, including what you see in front of you. This was called the glass harmonica. This is not from the 1700s, but Benjamin Franklin in the United States wanted to patent something called the glass harmonica. People started thinking that the glass harmonica must have been related to the harmonica that we know, but no, it wasn't. It's something I bet you've seen where people have glasses filled with water, rub your fingers around the top, and depending on how much water is in the glass, you can get a different pitch. Well, that was Benjamin Franklin's, I don't know if he invented it or not, but he was trying to patent some element of that. We also have seen something called a metal harmonica, which was actually the glockenspiel, and something called the harmonica du bois, my French is correct there, which ended up being the xylophone. We've also seen the term mouth organ used to describe what we call today the jaw harp. You see somebody playing it here. There were different jaw harps that actually had 5 different pitches in it back several hundred years ago. And we next saw the panpipe be called a mouth organ also. But we do know that when we got into the 1800s that the harmonica was being developed in this part of Germany, in this part of Europe, in Germany and Switzerland and in Austria. There's a little evidence that somebody was working in Great Britain also in 1929, and even possibly in the United States. But we do know that much work was being done by the instrument makers and clock makers in Germany, Switzerland, and Austria. There's a few people I wanted to highlight in particular. One is Christian Bauschmann. He was from a family of instrument makers in Germany, and he is credited with creating an instrument called the Aura in 1829, which was a bunch of pitch pipes connected to each other. There's a name that I wish we had up there. We just couldn't find a picture of him. And that's probably not surprising since we can't even figure out what his first name was. But his last name was Richter. Now, this guy, who was also an instrument maker, developed the harmonica that we know today, right down to 10 holes, 2 reed plates, with 2 reeds in each hole, where you could blow into each hole and get a note, and you could draw and get a note. Before that, it was always a blow instrument, so you were always blowing out and getting the notes. Some of the Shangs may have had notes that you could get both ways, but the instrument that Mr. Richter developed was really the beginning of the harmonica that we know today. The way he laid out the harmonica is on the next slide. If you are looking at the front of the harmonica, if I was holding the harmonica up to your face right now, and you could see the holes, there's 10 holes, and we can see the numbers across the top. I'm putting the blow notes, so the blow reed on the top, and the draw reed on the bottom. And these are numbers of the scale that you see here. This would be the major scale, or as many people know it as the do-re-mi scale. Let's look at the middle part of the harmonica. Can we highlight that? The next slide there. Can you see that? Okay. Well, from hole 4 through 7 is the entire major scale. So I have the number, each note is given a number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And then it repeats 1. We're not going to go into too much music theory, but those are the notes of the major scale, the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. So if I blow in the 4th hole, switch harmonicas here, this is a blow, and this is a draw. That's 4 blow, 4 draw. This is a 5 hole, the 6 hole. Actually, the notes are switched here, but I can finish the octave, the scale. That probably sounds familiar to you. You can play thousands of songs just by using these 7 notes. There's, well, let me give you an example here. I'm going to try to pick something from back in the era when this was first developed, back in the 1800s. This is actually before that. But I don't know anything from that time in history. So let me try this one. That's Bach. So, but that's how the harmonica was intended to be played. By using that middle octave, most of what I just played was using those notes in the major scale. On the left side of the harmonica, down on the holes 1, 2, and 3, is where we can play chords that would accompany that playing. So if I just blow in the hole 1, 2, and 3, I get a chord. I get the C chord on this C harmonica. And if I just draw in on those same 3 holes, on hole 1, 2, and 3, I get a chord that is in harmony with that first chord. It's the 1 chord and the 5 chord, the tonic and the dominant chord. So they go together beautifully. So I can play a melody on one side and I can play chords that go with it on the other side. This is what Richter was trying to do when he put together the harmonica that's laid out this way. That is very confusing when you first start playing, and you wonder why it's laid out in this very odd order. You can, if you look in the second hole and the third hole, and you see that one note is repeated twice, and so other notes are missing. So it looks all cockeyed, but it works out wonderfully, and we still play it this way. You probably, if you've ever bought a harmonica, you've seen where you get a song like this. Something like that, and that's what I'm doing. I'm using that middle octave to play just a simple melody. So now, the Hohner company, the other gentleman in that picture that we looked at a second ago was Matthias Hohner. He was at a very young age, the age of 24, started his own harmonica company, and he was more than a craftsman. He was a clockmaker, but he was very much a craftsman, but he was a great businessman too and marketer. He started selling harmonicas all over the world, including to the United States. And at one time, the demand was so high here in the United States that he only sold to the United States. And we think about it, why was the demand so high for harmonicas, of all things, in the United States? Well, for one thing, it was cheap, and we were not a wealthy country. It's small. You could stick it in your pocket. And we were a very mobile country, and it kind of fit our persona. So he started selling harmonicas in the United States in the 1860s. Now, that happened to also be the time of the Civil War. And the soldiers in the Civil War were given harmonicas. Abraham Lincoln is said to have called the harmonica the instrument of the people. And some people believe that he actually played the harmonica. I don't know if there's any real evidence of that, or we just want to claim Abraham Lincoln as one of our own. Nonetheless, it became an instrument that was easy for the soldiers to cart around. This was also the time of slavery in our country. And while slaves were denied so many of their human rights and great indignities, they were allowed to play music. They were allowed to sing. And some of them became actually very good musicians. And they ended up playing for their owners, but also played for themselves. Now, the tonality of the harmonica fit the music that they played because they retained some of the African influence, even if it was over 100 years or longer. Some of that tonality was maintained in what they sang and what they played. And that tonality is something that you can get on the harmonica, almost quite by accident. And harmonica players at that time developed this way of playing that we call cross position. And we'll take a look at the harmonica where we're just envisioning it. Now, I don't expect you to memorize this or necessarily even know what I'm talking about, but just understand that we started playing it in a different key. And a C harmonica actually playing in the key of G. So this gave us, the notes are very similar between C and G, but this gave the players the ability to play, to bend the notes and use some of the tonality, the blue notes as we call them. And it sounds like this. those notes, which I'm creating a different pitch on the harmonica in this way that one of the fellow musicians used to call it playing it the wrong way. But when you hear the harmonica played now, if it's in blues or in rock and roll and country music, things like that, you're almost always hearing it played in this crossed position. So we will move on to our next slide here. Between the Civil War and about 1900, it's a little vague of what was going on with the harmonica, but we do know that it was used often, particularly in the southern part of the United States, to imitate the human voice, babies crying, trains, animals. So let me try a little bit here. This would be my chicken, all right? My chicken scratch. My baby crying. And my human voice, and we may get a chance if we have time to listen to somebody who's really good at this in a couple of minutes. This would be my mama. And of course, what any harmonica player is required to do is play the train. I'm going to play it very briefly, but then we're going to try to listen to a great player who's actually he recorded this much later by the name of D. Ford Bailey. So here's mine. Got to take it into the tunnel. Bring it out. I got to put the brakes in as we come into the train station. All right. Let's see if we can listen to D. Ford Bailey. Do it the right way. There's a great book about the life of D. Ford Bailey, if you're interested, called D. Ford Bailey, A Black Star in Early Country Music. You know, back then, he played in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. He was the first player playing at the Grand Ole Opry when it was a radio show. And he was on for years on there, suffered great indignities, and always was a man of true character. So if you're interested in reading about him, this book is written by David C. Morton, M-O-R-T-O-N. There's also a documentary that was made up of his life, of D. Ford Bailey. I think it's of the same name. I actually got it for my class with the help of one of the librarians here at RIT, who had to do a lot of looking around and finally found it. So if you're ever interested in that, maybe somehow we can get it out to people where they can see it. There's another player, but there's a record that I would like you to be aware of. Do we have that list of the album cover? It's called, there's a CD called Harmonica Blues, Great Harmonica Performances of the 1920s and 30s. And DeFord Bailey is on this also. I think he's just one song on there. But he and these other players, you can hear them bridging the gap between when the harmonica was used just to play melodies and then to imitate people and animals and things like that, and the blues and more sophisticated melodies. So I recommend that. I'm going to be playing it in my class soon for the students there. And there is a player who bridges the gap from these players who were in the 20s and 30s, and the more modern players. And I got to see him play at the Red Creek, which I'm so glad that I did. And he was amazing, and did get to speak to him on the break. And his name is Sonny Terry, and we're going to try to play a little bit of his. Now, Sonny Terry is a guy who was blinded when he was a child in 2 separate accidents. And he played a couple of different partners, but he played for many, many years with Brownie McGee, who was a guitar player who I saw him with. So this is something you'll recognize. This is his characteristic, his very own whooping that he does when he plays a song. Very, very rhythmic. And you may even hear him imitating the human voice in here. Let's see how that goes. And that's Sonny Terry. He played into the 1980s. Let's move on to the players that we call them the post-World War II players. Now, these are the players that are probably the most influential players on people today. They certainly are on me. Many of these musicians were born in the South, some in Mississippi, which I visited in January on a grant where I went to Ole Miss University and went around the Delta to talk to musicians and study the music and the terrain and who's playing what down there these days. Anyways, many of these guys were from that area, the Mississippi Delta. Buddy Guy and Junior Wells. Junior is the one on the right side with the fancy hat on there on the top. James Cotton, who's still alive and playing, just had an album come out not too long ago. Big Mama Thornton, one of the, not a lot of women represented in this, but she was a great player, and I'm hoping, with some women in my class, I'm hoping to help create the next generation of players. There is a website that lists, it's just women harmonica players. I'm not sure what it's called, but there are many women who are playing. Anyway, there are more of these players from that era, from the 40s and the 50s. Some of them played much later than that. Howlin' Wolf, Sam Myers, who I saw at the Red Creek, George Harmonica Smith, Big Walter Horton, who I also saw. I think we have something queued up where we can play. Do we have something to play from here? No? All right. So these are the players that influenced the rock bands to a great extent. And they also played the electric harmonica, meaning they were playing through amplifiers. It wasn't the acoustic kind of player. You can see George Smith and James Cotton playing that way right there, right now. Oh, let's see, we almost had that website there. The greatest of all the players from that era is Little Walter Horton. Little Walter Jacobs, I'm sorry. There he is. Little Walter was probably the most influential harmonica player ever in the blues tradition. He was for me, and he's the one who made that cupping the mic in your hands. The mic was attached to a guitar amplifier usually, and you got that electric sound. And he also, at the ripe old age of, I think, 22, recorded a song that may be the most influential blues harmonica song ever, and that's Juke. I think we can play that. We got that up there? Okay, that's Little Walter's, the beginning of Little Walter's tune, Juke. And even that intro where he's repeating the same lines, and there are people who can play that song note for note. In fact, if you saw the movie Cadillac Records, Kim Wilson, a great harmonica player, does that, plays that song note for note. He's the harmonica behind the scenes for that song. So there are many great players today who have taken the harmonica to new levels, and let's take a look at that. There are people, and there are so many of them I didn't know who to put up here, but people like Annie Raines, Charlie Musselwhite, who's been playing for 50 years, Sugar Blue, who was the harmonica player on the Rolling Stones hit Miss You back in whatever that is, in the disco era, John Popper, who has unbelievable speed and his playing, Mark Wenner, a guy that I got to know a little bit from Washington, D.C., Billy Branch, still playing, Carlos Del Junco, who is out of Toronto. There are so many more. In fact, there's somebody I didn't know where to put them. I think if we can go to the next slide, I made a list of players from different kinds of music. I just put one for each because there's just too many of them. But these are people, if you're interested in the harmonica and these different styles, I'd love to have you listen to Charlie McCoy for country music, and Toots Thielmans, who saw at the age of, he was about 85 years old and played at the Jazz Festival here in Rochester, and he was still a fantastic player. Mike Stevens, a Canadian who plays bluegrass, of course John Popper, Brendan Power, a great Irish player, dazzling licks that he can play. Larry Adler from many years ago, a classical player. Freeman Stowers, another player from before World War II. But I left off probably the greatest diatonic harmonica player who ever lived. And in my opinion, he is the greatest ever. Almost because he defies any category, and his name is Howard Levy. He played at the Jazz Festival also, and he just has, he can do things with a harmonica that nobody before has ever done, and nobody has surpassed him yet. So that's about it. We thought we might play just a little bit of one of my favorite blues players, which is Sonny Boy Williamson. I visited his grave on my trip, and there's a great song. You can see this on YouTube if you want to see him, because he's probably the coolest guy ever. Let's just listen to a little bit of it. I think we can all learn from Sonny Boy to just slow down a little bit in your playing, something that I sometimes need to be told. So that's it for me. I hope you learned something or enjoyed it. I encourage you to buy a harmonica and start playing if you'd like, or support your local harmonica players, and just appreciate what the harmonica means to the blues and how it's become a part of so many different kinds of music around the whole world. So if anybody has any questions or anything they want to talk about, I'm happy to talk.
We do have some questions. Thank you, Tom, for an excellent presentation. For those of you who are hearing him on the line, I'm sure it's fantastic, but just to see him play is a real treat. We have a question from Sarah, who wants to know, how much does a harmonica cost?
A harmonica can cost anywhere from about $5 to $350, and I'm talking about just the little tiny harmonicas. The harmonicas that I buy cost, I think, $42 today, and I tend to play the Hohner Special 20, but they come in all ranges. I wouldn't, particularly if you're a beginner, I wouldn't spend any more than that.
And what makes different harmonicas cost more or less?
Well, the quality of the material, how airtight they are. When you get up into spending hundreds of dollars on harmonicas, those are not the kind that you buy in the store. Those are the ones that are made by customizers, where they upgrade the material and they do all kinds of things. If it's a wood harmonica, they sand the wood down and all, things like that. One of the main things they do is they take the reeds and they adjust the reeds so that you can create new notes, new bends and things, and play at a louder volume. This is where Howard Levy is just a mind-boggling player, the things that he does. And he has all these customized harmonicas that he can play. He can use a diatonic harmonica to play completely chromatically, meaning all the notes. He can take one harmonica and play it in all 12 keys. It's pretty amazing.
Well, we had another question come in from J.F. Scott, who wants to know what your thoughts are of Paul Butterfield.
Oh, he's one of the players I should have put on the list. Paul Butterfield was a player who grew up in Chicago, the north side of Chicago, and he was considered the first great white blues harmonica player. He was a very powerful player. In fact, we listened to him last night. I was at band practice last night, and we listened to a Paul Butterfield song. He had a great tone and power in his playing. He rarely went above the sixth hole on the harmonica, which is amazing. But a lot of players play primarily at the bottom end. But big fan of Paul Butterfield. Should have put him on the list.
So we have another question coming in. Where do you go to listen to live blues and harmonica music now that Red Creek is no more? Where do people go, Tom?
Around Rochester?
Yeah.
Well, we've been relegated to some of the small places. There was a kind of a heyday for this music through the 70s and 80s, and I played more large venues back then than I do now, and I wasn't even that good a player back then. There's some places like Beale Street, actually it's called the Beale now, the Beale 1 and 2, one's on South Avenue, one's in Webster. There is Smokin' Joe's on Lyle Avenue, Sticky Lips then in Henrietta, some places like that, and there's some others. I'd have to look them up myself. I hope to be playing them soon. Last night was my first practice with a new band, so I got to see where we're going to try to play.
Everyone better look out for Tom Haney coming to a town near you. Abigail shares with us that her dad plays harmonica in a blues band in Buffalo, and goes through harmonicas like crazy. Is there a brand or type of harmonica that would help him not have to go through them so quickly?
I wish I had an answer for that. And no, I don't know of anyone that's more durable. There are some out now that are made with stainless steel reeds, and supposedly they will last longer. And I have a few of those. I don't prefer them. They're great. The Seidel company makes a lot of stainless steel harmonica, the reed plates and the reeds. That could be a good choice. Give that a try. Lots of times it has to do as much with how you're playing. If you play really hard, you'll wear them out more. I used to play so hard I would just blow through them, flatten out the reeds, and I'm trying, after 40 years, I still haven't succeeded, but I'm trying to learn to play a little softer and let the amp do the work. And sometimes I succeed and sometimes I don't. But I play them too long. I play them when they're beyond their expiration date, just because people think you get off cheap because you're a harmonica player, and they say you bought a harmonica for $40, that's cheap. Well, no, I have about 25 harmonicas I bring to every gig, and then they wear out. So, but some of them I've used for years.
So Carol wants to know, is the harmonica like a trumpet where only people with a certain mouth shape can play it, or can anyone play the harmonica?
I firmly believe anyone can play.
Even I.
Even you.
Tom gave me a harmonica, so even I can play the harmonica.
Even you, Talia. Yeah, I've never read anything that said that any kind of shape of your mouth or your lung power or anything has anything to do with whether you can play. You know what it is? That people who can play are people who play, who practice, who spend the time that it needs to get good. And I have a lot of people, I give lessons to people, and people say, well, I'm just not musical, or I can't do that. I tried to play the piano, I couldn't do it. No, you just didn't keep playing. You just stopped playing. That's what happened.
We've had a request for you to say something about learning the chromatic harmonica.
Oh, the chromatic. I happen to bring one here today. The chromatic harmonica, as I think I mentioned, was invented by the Hohner Company in 1924. And it contains all the notes. As I said, I could actually play up the scale. It's a little bit older one. The wind savers, which are what they put over the reeds at the low end of the chromatic harmonica, sometimes don't sound so great, but I'm going to play first the major scale, and then I'll add all the notes in between. So this would be the major scale, just the do, re, mi scale on the chromatic. But there's a little slide on the side. I can push it in, and I can get every note. So I can get not just C and D, I can get that C sharp between the two. So I can play every note. That means I can play any melody, I can play any key, all on the same harmonica. People sometimes come to my gigs and they look at my collection of harmonicas. They're so impressed by the fact that I have 20 or 30 or whatever it is in front of me. I went to see a great jazz player, Hendrik Merkin from Germany. He had one harmonica with him, and he says, I keep I keep one in the back in case I'm having trouble with this one. So he walks in with just a chromatic harmonica. But these great jazz players, it's a whole different world. Toots Thielemans is a great example of that, but there's some other great players around also. So I can play it a bit. I'm not a great player. It is used in the blues. In fact, I think the first one I ever heard play it was Little Walter Jacobs, who played, it sounded like this. So a little different sound. Is actually kind of based on what we would call third position. But the chromatic is a very versatile instrument.
We had a couple of questions come in asking, where can people sign up to take your class?
That's a good question. Where can you sign up? At RIT someplace.
That's right.
If people are interested, now we're in the middle of the semester right now, but we are going to offer it again. You could call the Center for Multidisciplinary Studies, and you could take the class as a student if that's what you want to do. Or some people have asked about auditing it. I've gotten great response to this class. I have somebody auditing it right now. It's a couple of people who wanted to. Employees weren't able to do it because of their schedule. And that's a little easier if you just wanted to come to the class. But call the Center for Multidisciplinary Studies. I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but you could find it at the RIT website.
Fantastic. I know we did not get to everyone's questions today, but this is all the time we have. However, you can email the questions that were not answered to ritalum@rit.edu or tweet them to @RIT_alumni with the hashtag #MeRITWebinars, and we will direct your questions to Tom. Note that all participants will receive an email from us in the next few days with a link to today's webinar recording. Many thanks, Tom, for being our distinguished speaker today, and thank you to all of you for joining us for today's webinar. Keep an eye out for an email about our next webinar. Karen Putz is joining us for a webinar titled Unwrapping Your Passion at Any Age on March 17th.